This is the Atari 8-bit podcast.
When I worked for Prentice Hall, when I worked for West Publishing, when I started my own company, I never forgot that. A good book is one that sells.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Merl Miller was co-founder of Dilithium Press, a publisher of computer books that was in business from 1977 through 1986. Merl was co-author of Computers for People with Jerry Willis, a book that heavily features Atari 8-bit computers, and Things to Do with Your Atari Computer with Jerry Willis and Nancy Morrice, as well as several other books about other types of personal computers. Dilithium Press also published An Atari for Kids, An Atari in the Classroom, 32 Basic Programs for the Atari Computer, The Peanut Butter and Jelly Guide to Computers, and is perhaps best known for Computers for Everybody. Check the show notes for a link to Dilithium's press kit from the 1984 West Coast Computer Faire provided by the Ted Nelson Junk Mail Project, and to links of PDFs of some of Merl's books. This interview took place on June 26, 2017. I understand that you were, I think, a fighter pilot, and then you did some other interesting things. So can you kind of give me the prehistory?
Yeah, you're right. I was a fighter pilot, and I was in don't say Air Force or I'll have to kill you.
All right.
Because I'm a Marine. And a lot of people don't know that Marines have planes. You know, the difference between Air Force and Navy and Marine fighter pilots is the Air Force is at 5,000 feet, the Navy's at 1,000 feet, and the Marines just put the wheels down and run over them.
Nice.
So, and then I got shot down in Vietnam. Was pretty seriously injured. Spent the next 21 months in a hospital, and then I bounced around for a while. I have a degree in electrical engineering, and 1 quarter of graduate school in physics. And I bounced around for a while, and then I worked for Prentice Hall. And Prentice Hall was, I know they were part of somebody else then, but they were a big company on their own at that point. And
sure.
I was in the first I was a salesman for them, and then I was an editor for them, and then I left and went to a company named West Publishing and helped start their college publishing division. And then I decided, I created millions of dollars worth of sales for these people. So I decided to start my own company, and I started a college textbook company called Matrix, Matrix Publishing. And we, after a couple of years of that, a guy in Oregon named Dick Abel called me and wanted to know if I wanted to go into a partnership on publishing the stuff with these new personal computer things, and Dick was one of those guys that thought that if you had 2 to the 10th something, that half of that was 2 to the 5th. He wasn't exactly computer literate. So we started Dilithium Press in 1976, and my wife was my second employee, and we've been married ever since then. Dilithium really started in 77. Matrix started in 76.
Oh,
my wife was my second employee. We were married, very happily married ever since then.
Nice. Was she your employee first, or your wife first?
She's my employee first.
Oh, okay.
I didn't even know her before she worked for me.
Wow, cool.
And Patty's basically the perfect combination. Not that we were anything like them, but you have the front person, right? Like Jobs and Wozniak or Gates and Allen, where you have the front person and the back person, the person who actually makes things work. Well, she was the one that made things work. She was kind of like the Woz or the Allen of our business, and I was more like the Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, except they were a lot better at it than I was.
So I saw this.
A whole order of magnitude better.
Yeah, I think you did all right. So I saw this number when you said you founded Matrix. A couple times I saw this quote that you founded the company with $9 of your own money and a $1,000 loan. And I feel like there's a story there.
Yeah, it was actually $10 of my own money.
Okay.
No, you're right. It was $9. It was $9, right? And the loan was somebody loaned me the money to get some equipment and office and stuff like that, and then we paid it back almost immediately. And then the matrix itself, we were located in Champaign, Illinois. The matrix itself had investors, and the first $1,000 that got us started was a loan from a couple of professors at Auburn, and we paid them back, and then they immediately put it back in as an investment in the company. So it wasn't paid back for very long. It was paid back for like a week before they put the money in. And
Right.
they were good guys. We had the investors in Matrix were all college professors, and then Dick Abel came along, and we did Dilithium Press from there, where we moved into in 1977. We moved to Oregon, and stayed in Oregon for basically. We've left Oregon a couple times since then, but we've been here since 1976 or 77, I guess it was.
Oh, and so you're still in Oregon today, is that right?
Oh yeah, I live in Southern Oregon.
All right. I'm in Portland, so.
Yeah, I live in Medford, and we've lived in Medford all together now for 15 years.
Nice. So I want to ask about the name dilithium. I assume that's a Star Trek reference.
Oh yeah, yeah. We were sitting in a hotel in Chicago, because like I said, Matrix was in Champaign. We're sitting in a hotel in Chicago, and Dick smoked cigars, and I'm allergic to tobacco smoke, so that's not a really great combination for partners in any business.
No.
And so we're sitting in this hotel, and it was let's see, it was early spring, so it wasn't exactly warm out. I mean, cold out. It wasn't exactly warm out, and we made Dick sit on the balcony, and we had the door open. Dick sat on the balcony and smoked a cigar, and we had two chairs in front of him. And he's sitting on the balcony smoking a cigar while we talked to him about getting this computer company started. And we're trying to come up with a name, and he said, well, you know that big airplane thing that all the kids like, that's a movie? And I said, no, as a matter of fact, I don't. He said, yeah, you know, it's a big airplane thing, and it's way out in the future. And I said, do you mean Star Trek? Yeah, that's the name of it, Star Trek. And he said, well, we need something from that. And Patty finally came up with the name Dilithium Brass.
Nice.
She came up with the name Dilithium, and we don't know whether we're going to call it Dilithium Publishing or whatever. And Dick finally decided to call it Press, and we called it Dilithium Press. And Patty designed a logo that was a little D and a large P, so you turn it upside down, and it looked the same either way. It was upside down or right side up. Right,
and it's sort of in it looks like it's in a TV tube sort of thing, computer monitor.
Yeah, exactly. That was the whole idea. And it was people would get the logo wrong sometimes, but the logo actually was kind of popular. That was one of the two marketing things that we did that were popular. The other one was our catalog. We had a catalog named Brain Food, and we would send that out to people in the bookstores primarily, and they just thought that was great. And then it was bookstores would put it out, would have it out like laying out on their counter, and people would steal it. And so we finally just started putting it out for, anybody wanted one, they could get one. If you were in a bookstore and you wanted a copy of Brain Food, if you sent us $1, we'd send you one, or an order. When you placed your first order, you got your $1 back.
Sure.
So it was fun.
Any particular reason that dilithium was always spelled lowercase?
Didn't the DP thing where the D was small and the P was large and you turned it upside down, looked the same way?
Oh, okay. Sure.
That was the whole idea.
You guys focused on beginning computer books, and I'm curious why. I mean, you guys published, I think, at one point more than 80 beginning computer books for all the different platforms. Any particular? Why did you decide to focus on that aspect of the computer market?
Well, because it was what I think is where people were needed. I think it's people needed that more than anything else, and they when I would go out and talk to people, which I did a lot, because every year I would go, and I started this when I had Matrix, but every year in January of every year I would take a 6-month trip, and what I would do is I would go out and talk to bookstores, and I'd go out for 3 weeks. I'd just drive my car. And I'd go out for 3 weeks, and then I'd leave my car in an airport somewhere, and then fly home for a week, and then go out for 3 weeks again. And I did that from January until June, and I went all over the country, and I had all kinds of friends all over the country in various bookstores, and they kept talking to me about, do some, do books that anybody can read, because that's what they're all looking for. That I think the first person to really talk to me about, just focus on these beginners books, because we already had a few of them. And our first book, however, there wasn't that much beginners. It was 2 to the 10th questions and answers about microcomputers, and you had to know a little bit about them to read that one. And that was really the first book. And actually, the first book was a dictionary type thing. But when I went and talked to people, and I talked to, I talked to Mike Powell at Powell's Books in Portland all the time. Because, it's a big bookstore and very popular. And,
sure.
And so on. I assume he's still around up there somewhere.
The bookstore is. I don't know if he's still around.
You don't know about Mike. Hey, yeah. Well, Mike's my age, and I'll be 75 in a couple of weeks. So, in fact, Mike might even be a couple of years older than I am. And anyway, I used to talk to him about it. And he really liked those beginners books, and he put me on to some other bookstores that felt the same way. And I took a lot of guidance from Mike Powell, and I don't remember her name, but the woman that owns. There used to be a bookstore in San Francisco called a clean, well-lighted place for books, and the woman that owned that, used to talk about them, and we talked about how to place them, and and all that. And so we started on the fundamental stuff, and then. As part of this traveling that I did every spring, I worked up a speech where I would go around and talk to people about how to sell computer books, how to put them in your store, and all that kind of stuff. And so I went a whole bunch of different cities. I think I went to maybe 40 cities or 50 cities or something. Wow. where and you'd have, and I'd have, 20, 25 booksellers there at that. And so I tell them how to place the books, and then afterwards they talk to me about it, and we'd say, this is you want your very basic beginner books right at eye level, and because those are what people are looking for, and that wound up selling 600,000 copies of Computers for Everybody, and because people put that right, because that was my book, Jerry Willis and I wrote that, and we put that right up where people could look at it and say, and then take the ones with Adam Osborne, put them down upside down at the bottom. It was one of my favorite jokes, but I didn't really want to read that to Adam's books, but I would always say that during the speech. And then, and then one meeting, at a meeting that I went to in Colorado, we had a woman show up that recorded it, and then we sent the tape out to bookstores, and they loved that. And so, the bookstore owners basically said they wanted introductory, easy-to-read books because that's what people were asking for. And then we told them how to display those books in their stores. And so we had them displayed everywhere that way. And there were technical books that people came in and got and liked those. But we found that most people, what they really were looking for is how to get, how to learn something. I heard about computers, and I want to learn something about it, and then they'd go out and try to find a book, and they'd get one of Adam's books, and it looked the same upside down as it did right side up. You couldn't even read the damn thing. You could if you're an engineer like me or like Adam,
mm-hmm.
or like Rodney Zacks or somebody like that.
Right.
You could, but not that way. And the other guy that told me that we didn't need to do those kind of books was Bill Gates. He and I went through it, and you do your podcast just for Atari people. Atari, are you aware that we had a book called Computers for People? It was an Atari.
Yes, I have a list of your Atari books that I plan to ask you about in a little while.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go through that one. Atari asked me to write that book for him.
I kind of thought so. It seemed a little. I mean, it's a good book, but it seemed Atari. Like kind of marketing towards specifically for Atari.
Yeah. We sold that in a few bookstores, but primarily it was sold by Atari. We had some books with Radio Shack too that we specifically did for Radio Shack.
So did these companies, pay you to create these books, or how did that work? How did that interface?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
We don't do it for free.
Well, sure.
Yeah, we got the computers for people thing and some other things we did with Atari was worth about $1 million.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. It was a very big deal. It's a very, very big deal.
And then they bundled it with some of their computers, I believe. You bought an Atari 800 for a while, yeah.
That little. They started bundling originally with that one that had the plastic keyboard. I don't remember. Was that the 800?
That was the 400.
That's the 400, right? Yeah, they bundled. The other thing is, and we do things with these computer people. They give us the computer, and when Apple came to us when the Macintosh came out. Apple came to us and had us write a book for them too. That was presenting the Macintosh.
Okay.
And we did that for Apple with Apple's guidance. And we went to a meeting that they had, a whole bunch of providers that they had. The thing I remember about that was interesting once you remember about things, years later. The big thing I remember about that Apple meeting was Guy Kawasaki handing out shirts, T-shirts. And they didn't have them in extra fat. So the one I had to give to one of my kids. They were way too small for me.
So you did, but before, in the earlier days, before the Macintosh and PC kind of took over everything, you guys came up with books for all the different platforms. I mean, there's books about Atari and TRS-80 and Commodore and Timex Sinclair and CPM and DOS. You guys really straddled all the fences.
No, the Timex Sinclair, there's a funny story behind that.
Tell me.
Timex Sinclair, and that's where it was really needed, where our kind of books were needed, is because the Timex Sinclair had a user's manual. It was only like 12 pages long. And everything it says, when the Z appears, you do this. So when the Z appears, you do this. So when the Z appears, so we turn it on, there's no Z. Mm-hmm. And everything in it said, when the Z appears, and there were all these things you're supposed to do because of the Z. And so we finally had to call them. What do you do if the Z doesn't appear? Oh, yeah, right. Well, and we went through this long thing about what to do. And that the first part of the book on the Sinclair was how to make the damn Z appear. They never talk about it in their user manual. Not a word. Not a word. They just assumed everybody knew how to do that. And it wasn't that easy. Yeah. I started in a business by building, what's that thing called? There was a hobby computer out of the MITS guys in Albuquerque that Bill Gates and Paul Allen worked for. Mm-hmm. And I started in a business by
the Altair.
The Altair, that was the name, right? By the Altair, by building one of those on my kitchen table.
Oh, and wow!
Of course, being being left-handed, of course, I wired up the transformer or something backwards. I don't remember what it was, and when it came on, all I did was smoke. And but I finally got to figure out how it worked. But go about my kitchen table. Anyway, we did a lot of books for any new thing or anything. You mentioned the TRS-80. That after the TRS-80 books, and then we did that whole series of books with Tom Rugg and Phil Feldman on 32 Programs For, and they did one for the TRS-80, and that's how we started doing that thing for Radio Shack.
So yeah, you guys did 32 programs. That was a series that you did for all sorts of different platforms. Yeah. I was wondering any significance to number 32 there, or just? I don't think. I think what happened is that's what Phil was primarily the programmer, and Tom Rugg was kind of the fix-it-all stuff. He was more of an engineer, and Phil is more creative type person. And I think 32 just sounded like a good number to him. I think that's what he came up with. Those are two interesting guys. Phil was the short guy, 6'4", little guy compared to Tom. Okay.
Tom, I don't know what Tom was, 6'8", 6'9", something. He's a big dude, and he got those great big fingers on those little tiny keys. That's what made me think about some of the keyboards that people make, and it has Tom, whose fingers is the size of a sausage, trying to type on the board.
Right. Timex Sinclair was not the computer for him, probably, with that tiny little keyboard.
That was no fun. That was absolutely no fun for Tom.
So, all right, I want to talk about the bestsellers. I mean, what were the books that kept the lights on? What were the big ones?
Well, the big one was, of course, Computers for Everybody, and we sold 600,000 copies of that over, was it 4 years or something like that it was good. And then we had the what was the thing? We had an admin book to one with it. I can't remember the name anymore. It was a book that we wrote that had all of the materials in it. That was kind of an interesting thing, that whole Computers for Everybody thing, because what we had an engineer and an educator. Jerry Willis has a I guess it's an EDD is what they are in education. But anyway, he has a doctorate in education, and he was, I don't know what he does now. He was a professor at Texas A&M, and so he knew the education stuff, and I was the engineer. And what's interesting is when we wrote, and Jerry and I wrote several books together. When we wrote books together, he really wrote the technical stuff. It was kind of an interesting combination. We always put him first on the books because he actually did the creative start, first pass at the book whole thing. He contributed, as far as I'm concerned, he contributed more than half. But Jerry wasn't very good, as a lot of people weren't very good. Jerry wasn't very good at putting stuff together in such a way that it would sell. And before I started any of this, I worked for Prentice Hall, and J. Prentice Ettinger, who started, one of the two people who started Prentice Hall, was once asked, "What's a good book?" He was in a meeting and people was going around a room about what's a good book, and everybody's saying, "Well, you got to have this, and you got to have this kind of cover," and they finally get to him, and somebody said, "Mr. Ettinger, what's a good book?" And he says, "A good book is one that sells." Pretty straightforward. And I never forgot that. And when I started publishing when I worked for Prentice Hall, when I worked for West Publishing, when I started my own company, I never forgot that. A good book is one that sells. And so when Jerry and I wrote books, Jerry did a lot of the creative stuff and the first pass and everything. And then I went back and made it so that it would sell.
So, okay, so I would like an example or two of what you did to enhance it so it would sell.
Shorter sentences. That's an example. Shorter sentences.
Okay.
You have to have a flow of ideas when you write. You know, if you read a novel, well, let's use a novel as an example, okay? And I'm writing one, by the way. If you read a novel, novels always start off with something that absolutely grabs your attention immediately. Mm-hmm. Because if they don't, you're not going to read it. And so we did, especially in Computers for Everybody, we had stuff in the first couple of chapters that grabbed your attention. And then at the end of every chapter, always made every chapter something at the end of every chapter, something that would say, well, you know, that's good, but then what happens? You know, you've read novels, I'm sure, and
sure.
And you get to the end of a chapter and you think, oh, then what's next? And you have to have a book. If you're going to have a book that's going to sell, you have something, especially something where you're talking about something that's a new technology and so on. You have to have something where at the end of every chapter somebody says, "What's next? You know, now what?" And so we did that. We did that a lot in the books we wrote together. That was more my contribution. If you look at and I helped him a little bit. That's I kind of made it up to Jerry for his stuff by helping him with some of the books he wrote. He wrote a book called Peanut Butter and Jelly Guide to Computers, which was pretty popular too. And then he wrote one on creating software called Nailing Jelly to a Tree. And his writings, that's what software is like, right? And I didn't help him with that at all, and it didn't sell. You know, it sold maybe 6,000 or 7,000 copies. And Jerry was used to these things that sold 40 or 50,000. Or like Computers for Everybody, 100 and some thousand every year. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I tried to get all the authors that I work with, you know, put something in there that people want to read. Because if you don't, they won't.
Sure. Jerry Willis seemed like a very prolific author. He did a lot for you guys, and he was giving talks about how to be a best-selling computer book author.
Yeah.
What was his magic?
He's real smart.
Okay.
and he wrote some books. His books, the books he wrote for the dummies books, you know, they weren't as popular. But he still did well with them. He still did well with those books. He just is real smart and personable, but he's an educator. I mean, his degree's in education. Actually, I believe his degree is in education psychology, so he's kind of like a shrink of some kind. Smart, a very smart guy. Very smart guy.
Yeah.
Personable.
So
he was our number one author, and then Rugg and Feldman were probably the next two, you know, with their books.
Okay. Good. So the first year, 1977, said you did about $38,000 in sales, and by 1983, the revenue was $5 million. That's
it actually. Yeah. We actually hit 6.3 at one point.
Wow. Excellent.
Yeah.
You guys had a lot of titles. That's it's kind of amazing.
We had some good folks. We had kind of a unique thing that we did. We had some really, really good people. We wanted people to start in a company because we didn't have a lot of money. We wanted people to start in a company at an entry-level job. Everybody. Nobody came in at any position. But right towards the end, we had someone when we screwed up and got venture capitalists. But you know, when it was just us doing it, we wanted people to start at a very entry-level type position.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is when you have very entry level and not willing to pay all that much, right? And you're talking about publishing and all of that kind of stuff, and you're looking for somebody for the position. Out of 10 people who think they want the position and apply, 9 of them will be women, and the 10th would be a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy thinks he ought to be paid twice as much as what we're offering. And so I don't know if you knew this about the dilithium press, but well over 2/3 of our employees were women. I think we had 63 employees, and like 45 or 46 of them were women. Because we had some really bright, talented people. A good example of that would be Kathy Filgus.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy Filgus came to work for us as a receptionist. That's the job she applied for. It's the first job she had. And by the time that dilithium was at its peak, she was the vice president of marketing. And so a lot of the marketing things you see that came from dilithium are really stuff that Kathy came up with. Yeah, and that's a good example of the type of people we hired. We hired some brilliant people. When Ramirez, after she left dilithium, after dilithium went under, when Ramirez went to Microsoft and some kind of, I remember what she does now, but she was fairly well up in the Microsoft business. And then, she's probably making $500,000 a year now. And then, I can't remember that little gal's name. There was an Ann something who worked for us that is a vice president at a big public relations company in Portland, or she used to be anyway. So we had some extremely, extremely talented employees.
In 1984, you said the hottest topic every writer wants to write about is the Macintosh. And then after that, you said it will be robots. Do you wish to stand by that statement?
Sure, you bet.
Yeah?
Yeah. Robots haven't come up like I thought they would, but I still think that that's going to be a market someday. It's going to be a really big market. I'll probably be long gone now, but that market didn't come up as quick as I thought. I really learned a lot and knew a lot, and still have followed it for several years now. The whole neural programming, artificial intelligence stuff, and the really the first regular book we had, not the dictionary. The first regular book we had was written by a guy named Rich Diday, who's kind of a famous artificial intelligence person now. He was reasonably well known then. He was, as far as I know, he's still a professor at the University of California, Santa Clara. He's a bright guy. That was the fun thing about doing that. We knew a lot of. We worked with. We had a lot of extremely intelligent employees. We had people come in, wanted to be receptionists, had master's degrees, and so we had a lot of extremely bright employees, and then we had these people we worked with that were just unbelievable. Some of the college professors and so on, extremely well-known people.
Yeah. And
so that's one of the things that made it so fun, was being around all of these movers and goers.
Sure.
Bright.
Yeah.
And we knew all the people. Somebody asked me the other day if I knew Bill Gates, and I said, yeah, but if you talk to Bill Gates now and you said, do you know Merl Miller? I'm sure what he'd say is, man, that name's familiar. Oh yeah. Was that the fat guy that did books? Or something like that,
Yeah.
In other words, everybody knows who he is. He probably remembers some of the people from that era, but not very well.
Yeah.
Who knows, right?
Who knows? You could ask him. All right, I'd like to talk about your Atari book specifically. I'm just going to throw the titles out there, and if you have anything to say about them, just jump in. Okay. We talked about a little bit about the computers for people, which was your $1 million deal with Atari.
Yeah, and the whole deal on that is that was basically a special rewritten version of Computers for Everybody. When I say that Computer Faire everybody sold 600,000 copies, the Computer Faire people actually sold more than that because they gave them. They're not sold so much; it's because they gave them away,
Mm-hmm.
and and all, and they sold them.
Sure.
And we sold it in stores and so on. But it was just a special rewritten version of Computer Faire everybody. Mm-hmm. And basically, I mostly did the rewrite on that one because Atari wanted it as a marketing vehicle. And like I said before, Jerry is a really smart guy. He really understands stuff. He's a good teacher. But, to put it bluntly, Jerry ain't no marketer. He doesn't know how to sell anything.
Okay. And Atari for Kids. I believe that's the one that has a clown riding a unicycle using an Atari on the cover.
Huh. I basically remember. Who's the authors on that?
I don't have that in front of me right now. Although the book. Yeah.
I think maybe that's Debbie. I think Debbie wrote that.
Let me go grab it. It's on my. Oh. I found it. Atari for Kids by Sharon Boren, Larry Hovey, and Kathleen Hovey.
Oh, okay. Now I remember who those people are. That wasn't Debbie. Yeah, I remember who those people are. Yeah. The reason I was thinking Debbie is that we got them from Debbie. They're friends of hers.
Next was Atari in the Classroom. And there was a teacher's activity workbook and a teacher's guide. And there's no author listed, actually.
Yeah. And I think that's those same people that did Atari for Kids, plus Debbie. Well, I know Debbie did a Atari book for kids thing. I think that's the one with. I'm pretty sure that Debbie did that one.
Okay. 32 basic programs for the Atari computer.
That's old Big Fingers Tom. Yeah, they just rewrote those. They rewrote those same programs. Actually, they didn't actually rewrite the same programs. Every book had its own 32 programs, but they were kind of rewritten for the books. But sometimes they would have something that they'd be working on a computer and they'd say, oh, this is much better. At 32, by the way, if you look through any of those, that 32 is just a number.
Sure.
What the real title should have been is at least 32 programs for the computer, because some of them have 40 or so.
Right. Yeah. Some of them are.
I don't remember how many.
Some of them are, Carl, more than 32 basic programs for the Commodore 64.
Yeah. That's called the Kathy Filgus approach. I'm sure that Kathy came up with that because she's a pretty good marketer. I'm sure that she's the one that came up with that. It's more than 32, right?
Yes.
But the more books were second. They weren't really second editions. They were an additional to the first ones. So you might have a book with 40 programs in it, and then you might have one called More Than 32 that's got another 40 programs in it.
I see.
They were pretty neat little programs that those guys wrote.
Sure.
And we came up with this thing where we could send out a disc with them. It was 5 1/4 disc, and Kathy and my wife Patty sit around playing one day, and they come up with this thing where they glued the disc onto the inside of the back cover. And they had some books where some of them that we sold with the disc glued onto the back of the inside of the back cover. Yeah, kind of a neat way to do it.
Right. So I wanted to talk about that. Two aspects. First of all, based on what I read, dilithium kind of helped pioneer selling software in bookstores, and I think what they meant by that was discs bundled with books. And some of the marketing materials was really touting the tamper-proof packaging to keep the discs from getting stolen off the shelves. Was that a big problem?
Yeah, and there wasn't no kind of pioneer. We did pioneer it, because I can remember Patty and Kathy standing out in the middle of the office putting that stuff together, figuring it out. And there was one with and I don't remember who it was. Somebody else decided to do the same thing, And when they did it, people were able to steal the disc out of the book. And somebody go to buy the book, and the disc was gone, and the bookstore would be all upset. And I think it was a lady down at a clean, well-lighted place for books that told me about that happening. And so Patty and Cassie took a look at ours and figured out a way to seal that in there. You had to put it in. It's like the packaging. The packaging that you have now when you have stuff that hang in a store and they put it together, they seal it in such a way that you got to basically cut it open with a scissors to get it out of there.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they did. They came up with that technique. There was some guy in Pennsylvania that they worked with, and they talked to him, and he came up with that idea of doing that. And he did all those. We had one person that produced the disc, and then he would send those discs to the guy in Pennsylvania that would seal them. Then the guy that sealed them would send them to whoever was doing the printing. And the printer would glue them to the back of the thing. So the only way you could take those discs out of a book was to get your scissors out, and you had to cut off the top of the back cover. It was the only way you get the disc out.
Huh.
We had people who were a little frustrated with that, but I'll tell you what, you got to, in a publishing business, and a lot of people get in the publishing business don't recognize this. Back then, a lot of people, I write books now too and publish them, but they're on Kindle, so you don't have the same situation. But back then, if you're in a publishing business, you're not selling to the end user, you're selling to the bookstore. You have to make the books such that the person is going to come in the book and buy them from the bookstore, but you have to be able to sell them to the bookstore in the first place. So a lot of the way you do the cover, a lot of the way things are structured, all of that stuff all comes down to how the bookstore sees it. So we did a pretty good job of trying to sell the bookstore, and you can just imagine how irritated the people in the bookstore would be if somebody came in and stole one of those discs out of a book.
Sure. Yeah. So how long did Dilithium Press last?
From 1977 until late 84, so 7 years.
So how did it end? Why did it come to an end?
Oh, stupidity on my part more than anything else. We were running in a hole. We like I said, we actually had in the last year, we had $6.3 million in sales. And the problem is that's accounts receivable. It's not cash. Okay. We sell a lot. The printer would like to be paid for us for printing the books for us. The guy that sealed the disc that we were talking about, he wanted to be paid. And the guy, the one that made the disc, he wanted to be paid. All these people wanted to be paid. The employees wanted to be paid their salary. And so, we have a big cash flow problem. And we did deal with Pacific Bank up there in Portland, and then we also dealt with a little bank out in Hillsborough, and they were worried. They'd come and audit our books and everything, and they were worried about the amount of money we borrowed from them and so on, and we'd have something on receiving. I told her we got paid a lot of money from Atari, but it all wasn't at once. We got it in segments, piecemeal. So we finally decided what we needed to do was get some venture capital. And we went out and raised $1 million in venture capital. Yeah.
Wow.
If you ever own a business and you're going to do something, don't get venture capital. Period.
Did that help lead to hasten the end of the business?
Well, that is what caused it to go under, was the venture capitalists. The venture capitalists wanted us to do things that were just downright stupid. They did not understand the business whatsoever. They put all kinds of restrictions on stuff we could do, and the stuff we were doing would make it work, and they were against that. And we had a bank that we could borrow money from. The bank wasn't all that excited about us not paying them back every once in a while, but they were still wanting loans to us. They didn't want us doing that, and all kinds of shit. It's just incredible. I mean, they were incredibly. If there's one way the best way to describe the venture capitalists is stupid. And they were really stupid. They really did not understand our business. And, they put $1 million in, and I think they cost us $1 million, at least $1 million in sales.
Wow.
Almost immediately. Yeah. I mean, and we had a guy that did a pretty good job of keeping our books and all that other kind of stuff, and we were paying him, I don't remember what we were paying him, and he had some mental health problems, that, but he was a pretty good accountant. You just had to let him take a day off every once in a while, and they decided that he wasn't sufficient, and they had to have you have to have a good financial man in any business, or it just won't operate. Well, we'd operated, all that time without one, and this guy came along, and they wanted us to hire a fancy CPA type. So we did, and paid him as much as we paid. He was the third highest paid employee in the company, by only a few dollars. Mm-hmm. And that was insane. I mean, and he was as bad as they were. He didn't know anything about our business. He knew nothing about publishing. And beyond not knowing anything about our business, the venture capitalist and the accountant that they decided that needed to be in the business they didn't know anything about publishing, let alone anything about the computer business. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dick didn't know anything about the computer business, and he was bought out, by the way. Dick was bought out by a guy named Paul McGuire, and Paul was our printer, and Dick owed, and Dilithium Press owed Paul a bunch of money, and so Dick sold out his thing for $450,000 plus Paul threw away all the printing bills, which is about the same amount. It was a pretty good deal. I mean, that gave us a big boost. And then Paul was our partner until venture capitalists came in. It was just a bad mistake. There were two mistakes made. The first mistake was thinking we needed venture capital, because we did not. Right? We had the whole venture capital thing put together when I made a deal with New American Library to produce a series of books for them. The books that you sell in bookstores and so on. And they gave us a $450,000 advance. Well, we were looking for $1 million from the venture capitalists. We get the $450,000 in from New American Library at about the same time we got the venture capital in. We do absolutely, and the venture capital money just sat there. We started using some of it and so on. We paid off the printing bills and stuff like that. But the people we're dealing with would have let us put up with that stuff, and we would have slowed down at some point. Yeah. It was just a big mistake. If we were going to take venture capital, that was the first mistake. The second mistake was I didn't ask for enough. I should have got, I should have got $5 million from them, because like every business out there, people started looking around and said, wow, these guys are doing well. We should publish books like that. And then in 1984, a whole bunch of other people started publishing books like that. My old employer, Prentice Hall, published a bunch of them. Microsoft started a publishing thing. And so there was some competition out there. Well, so had we had enough money, we could have survived that. But we started doing stupid things. So I give you an example. I talked to you before about my trips. Every 6 months that I went, down and talked to all the bookstores and, all that other stuff. One other thing that would happen from my trips like that is that I'd show up at a bookstore and talk to them, and I wouldn't say a word, and they'd have like 3 months they hadn't paid us, and just because I did not say a word about them paying us, but sure enough, they did right after I was there, and so it was like a collection tour as much as anything else, and we collect a lot of money. I went to Minneapolis and talked to Dalton, and they were talking about all of the different books that we had and everything that we did and so on, and they owed us a whole bunch of money. And I didn't say a word to them. I just talked to them about what we had new that was coming, and the guy wanted to know, well, how much can we get of this and how much can we get of that? And and I said, I just said to him, well, we're a growing company, and for us to provide all of those, we'd have to go borrow a bunch of money, and so let me think about that. And they owed us, I don't know how much money they owed us, but by the time I got back to Portland, Dalton had paid us like $300,000.
Wow.
And I didn't tell him to pay us. I just told him, well, I don't know if we could do that or not. And here's the thing, Kevin. The venture capitalists did not want me going out and talking to people like that. See? A lot of stuff. And so there was just two things. The venture capitalists, we let them in the doors like letting a fox in the chicken house. And then we also got a whole bunch of competition that we hadn't had before. And there were some people that published some really horrible books that people would go out and buy, right?
Yeah.
And people knew nothing about the computer business. They'd write a book, and it'd wind up on the shelves because the person had written other kinds of books, right? The bookstore would go ahead and carry them, and somebody goes into the store. They have $10 to buy a book. We have a book for $10. This other person who knows nothing about computers has a book for $10. Sometimes they're going to buy that instead.
Yeah.
And some of the bookstore owners knew better, right? But not all the bookstore owners knew better. And so, there was some competition from that, but that was definitely not the real problem.
Yeah. I heard
the real problem was venture capitalists.
As to the race to the bottom with too many poor books. I heard that same story from both Mitchell Waite and Rodney Zacks. They said something similar.
Oh, you talked to Rodney?
Yeah.
Yeah, Rodney's a strange guy. I haven't talked to him for years, but he's a strange guy. He's very, very definitely a strange guy.
He was
a fun guy. But...
Yeah, he was interesting to talk to for sure. Right, so what haven't I asked you about the dilithium days that I should have?
I don't know. I've always wondered what happened to all of the people who work for us. I'll tell you something else that's kind of really interesting about what we did is that we had a total of 64 employees, including Patty and me. 62 other than Patty and me. And we had, I think we ran ads in the newspaper and stuff like that, maybe for the first, at most 20. It's really starting about halfway through the second year, we quit having to do anything to try to find people who work for us because to find employees, we never used an employment agency until the venture capitalists came in to find that accountant guy. But we, the people that work for us would say, "Oh man, I have this great job, and you should work there," and so they would recruit their friends. So we had brothers and sisters and cousins and next door neighbors and all kinds of stuff as employees. And
nice.
We held a dilithium reunion in must have been 93, 92, 93, something like that. and everybody. It's interesting. We had about 40 people there, so about 2/3 of them boys were there. In other words, and Kathy Philbus, she's the one that put it together. I mean, she put it together and invited Patty and me, and Kathy put it together. And there were about 40. There was about 40 of us there.
Nice.
And every single person came up and told me it's the best place I ever worked. I think that's, to me, that's the dilithium legacy, is that we had something where people loved to work there, and they learned, and
Nice.
all of them started believing in themselves, and everybody that worked there eventually wound up. There's the boss. She just brought me a big glass of water, and I think everyone who worked there, started believing in themselves. And to the best of my knowledge, everyone that worked there went on and did something better for life.
Nice.
Well, let's ask Patty that question. What do you think is the number one thing best about dilithium press?
It was a family.
Huh?
It was a family.
Yeah. There. Did you hear that answer?
The family.
She
Yeah.
said the best thing, the family. Yeah. That was the best thing about dilithium press. The books we published, the software we published, and all that. That's nice, and they were something, and we enjoyed it. And, I basically lost $9, so that was sad. But adjusted for inflation, that's more like about 25 or something.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. You're never going to see that money again.
I'm never gonna see that money again. It's gone.
What do you do today?
I'm insurance agent. I did that for a lot longer than I did publishing or anything else. Actually, from 1987 to 2013, I was a financial advisor. In fact, I was here in Medford. I was the branch manager for a broker-dealer.
Okay.
Which is kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I've written 2 books on finance. Finance, one called Find Money Every Day and How to Fight Debt Collectors and Win. And now, and then about a month ago, I decided I was tired of being fat, old, and depressed. And so I went back to selling life insurance. And now I'm selling life insurance to old people.
Okay.
It's what they call the burial expense, burial insurance or fine. And I'm doing it primarily because it's, it gets me out of the house. And I'm also writing a novel about werewolves.
Nice. Awesome. Does it have a title?
Yeah, it's called The Wolf at Dawn.
Wolf at
It should
Dawn.
be out this fall sometime.
Nice.
The Wolf at Dawn. In my book, though, the werewolves are the good guys, and they only kill people who deserve kill. Did you ever read any of the Dexter? Is that his name?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
There's a guy that I think it's Dexter or Decker or something like that. And apparently there was a television series. I don't watch television, so I don't know. But this guy's a serial killer. He's a forensic scientist, and he's a serial killer at the same time. But he only kills bad guys. Somebody that, is a pedophile or somebody who gets away with murder literally or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he goes out and does them in. Well, my werewolves do basically the same thing. They just do it on a much grander scale. The book starts with him being told to kill a bunch of Nazis after the end of the Second World War. See, they lived to be 400 years old, so they've got plenty of time to get things done.
Nice.
And it's typical. The thing about writing a novel is then I'm allowed to just be the total smartass that I really am.
Awesome. Nice. All right. Well, I think that's about everything I have. Is there anything we haven't touched on that we should have?
No.
Awesome.
I think as they say, we're done good.
We've done it. Good.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe I could send the werewolves out to talk to some venture capitalists. That would be fun.
I could think of some politicians I'd like them to go talk to.
Boy, ain't that the truth. And I'm trying to figure out how to put that in a book. Man, that would be a good thing for him to do. You betcha. Anyway.
Well, thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah, you betcha. Thank you.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are 2 ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/Savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.